Discover over 100 episodes of Bartholomewtown on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Bartholomewtown Podcast.
I think that's the goal. We always want to expand our audience. We have, obviously, our broadcast product is very strong and it continues to grow. All of that is good. You are absolutely right. Our parent company, Nexstar, has focused on our digital product as well.
Welcome in to another edition of the Bartholomewtown Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, I circle back with WPRI's Tim White. Always a pleasure to sit down with WPRI's Tim White, as you'll hear in this interview. Now our annual appointment for a podcast conversation. Pretty fun episode. We look back on the 2018 election here in Rhode Island. We look forward in Rhode Island politics, talk Rhode Island media, and even touch on the late, great Jim Taricani. Stand by for an outstanding conversation with the one and only Tim White in a matter of moments. All right, Bartholomewtown listeners, you know what's going on now through November 3rd at Roger Williams Park Zoo. It's the Jack-O-Lantern Spectacular 2019 presented by Citizens Bank. And of course, this year, you're going to travel through a seasonal wonderland and celebrate the joys of New England. Feast your senses on autumn's beauty, winter's swirling snow, spring's first blossoms, and summer's ocean breezes. It's all intricately carved on thousands of pumpkins displayed along the zoo's wetlands trails. It's the Jack-O-Lantern Spectacular 2019 presented by Citizens Bank, now through November 3rd at Roger Williams Park Zoo in Providence. New episodes of the pod every Tuesday and Friday. Subscribe on your preferred app or listen on ripodcast.com or bartholomewtown.com. All right, without further ado, let's get right to it. From the Loft with WPRI's Tim White. Been, we're saying like a year and a half since.
Something like that.
You were one of the first guests, so.
Yeah, I was thinking about it on the ride over here, and I think there was snow on the ground.
Yep.
And, here we are in the fall. Long overdue is my point. We should make it an annual thing if you're up for it.
I would
to
love
get
that.
On this podcast. That's good for me. I like doing it. So.
Awesome. It's been, last time it was like almost months before the primary election in 2018,
That's
so
right.
It wasn't even really, the most fertile ground to break down where the state was heading. It still seemed like Reaganburg versus McKee was months away. So
Yeah, that's right.
looking back on the election cycle we just went through from a politics perspective, but also from your experience covering it. You moderated the debate at Roger Williams University, and were just generally at the forefront of covering the election last go-around. I know it's been a year. How can you package that up, that experience?
Wow, I have to dust off my brain on that because, right, a lot of water under the bridge in a year, particularly with politics and the stuff that I cover in my beat. But obviously, the progressives had a good year, a strong year, at the General Assembly. And there for us, we were sort of watching, okay, what does that mean for the House Speaker? Is he going to face some problems on the left flank, if you will, as they're going into the session, and how is he going to maneuver that? And at the end of the day, he maneuvered it like a skilled politician would. He was able to spread the wealth, I think, a little bit more, and he was able to not silence, not quiet, but manage, I think, the progressive wing of the caucus. There were still certainly plenty of policy disagreements going on and whatnot, but it wasn't the fire and brimstone that we wondered might happen inside that chamber. So that was interesting. I can't even. Yeah, you said moderated the debate with Ted Nesi at Roger Williams. I'm like, wait, wasn't that 4 years ago? Doesn't it
Right.
feel like that?
It does seem like ages ago.
It really does, and it's just
Yeah.
It's so funny. The Raimondo administration, pre-election and post-election, is very different. They don't have an election to worry about, so they're going to take the policies that are important to them, and they're just going to run with them without having to worry about so much of the political backlash that you might get. So they feel very different, and in a way kind of quiet, and this is more Ted's bailiwick, and he might have a different opinion. But I feel it's she obviously decided to tackle the Providence schools. You have to wonder if that's something that administration would have wanted to do right before the election. because it is a third rail issue. It's something that has been plaguing the state for a very, very long time. But I think the administration feels freed because they are term limited and they can go after something like this. So besides Providence schools, I'm sure I'll get an email from someone in their administration, but it feels like they've been rather quiet. Sure, they're doing a lot of different things, but it's not as forward-facing as what we're used to maybe going into an election.
Yeah, and she just recently said, I saw it in Roadmap this morning, Dan McGowan's newsletter, that she was on the Axe Files, David Axelrod's podcast. By the way, numerous invitations to the governor to come on this podcast. And after a handshake agreement last year saying she'd come on, a formal email saying she's not coming on. So the listeners out there, she's not coming on anytime soon.
Oh, Governor, if you're listening, you should do it. Come on the show.
But interestingly, in the email or in the email list that Dan McGowan sends out, Roadmap, he cites this Axe Files statement that the governor is concerned about Elizabeth Warren potentially being the Democratic nominee because of all the free things they're going to be giving away. I retweeted that. I already got pushback on Twitter from people saying, what about free college and so on and so forth. So it almost seems like she may be leaning back to her fiscal conservative roots in a way here at some level.
Yeah, I haven't heard her podcast on that, and I haven't seen your tweet there. But yeah, I think look, she obviously has some very progressive liberal policies, but there are areas where she is fiscally conservative. We're talking about a politician who championed pension reform. When she was general treasurer. And that is not something a liberal politician would do, particularly, at the ire of organized labor. So that is still a very, that's still in her fiber, I think. So I'm interested to listen to that. Candidly, I didn't know she was on the Axelrod podcast. So now I'm gonna have to listen to that and see what she says. There might be a story in there to do.
There might be. I think it just happened. I think she flew out last week to Chicago to tape it. So
okay.
But yeah, it just sort of seems like, post the wrapping up election, we had the movement from the Reform Caucus. I think we've got now the Rhode Island Political Co-op, the other progressive players that are kind of on their own as well outside of the system. I guess now like an Aaron Regenberg. It seems like there is a significant challenge from the left to the institutionalist Democrats in power, yet they won hand over fist last year in every major election.
So what I'm going to be looking for in 20 is, we have the state has a new chairperson of the state Republican Party now, Susie Yankee. We just had her on the Newsmakers program, our weekly politics show, and they are already identifying. And look, the joke is the GOP can caucus in a phone booth at the State House, but because their numbers are so small. But they're already identifying the seats that are currently held by Democrats in the General Assembly that they feel are up for grabs, maybe in districts that might lean sort of conservative or have leaned conservative. And they're going to put their focus and energy there. They're not going to cast as wide a net. So it'll be interesting to see if the General Assembly becomes more and more, the middle ground is lost, right? Mm-hmm. And you have people more to the right and you have people more to the left. I think that the headwind that Susie Yankee is facing right now is we're going into a presidential election with President Donald Trump at the top of the ticket in a very, very blue state. And I think that the Republicans might have a harder time with him at the top of the ticket. That might drive out numbers from people on the left, from Democrats that are going to come out. And so even though the master lever isn't there anymore, those people tend to vote on one side of the ballot all the way down. So we'll see how she navigates that one. It's about money, and frankly, the other challenge the GOP in Rhode Island faces is they don't have the ground game that the Democrats have. Democrats have organized labor. They have a very powerful state Democratic Party. People, going door to door. Then that's how these elections are won. The Republican, the Chamber of Commerce, which tends to align itself with the Republican Party, they're not out like organized labor, knocking on doors and things like that. So right. I think that's another challenge that they have. But, we'll see. We'll see what 2020 brings.
It's going to be fascinating.
It's going to be fun.
2020 and 2022, no question about it. Got some good stuff coming up here. We'll see who runs for governor.
I know.
15 people in the race here.
I know. Well, it's going to be open on both sides.
Right.
And speaking of debates, it's going to be, that could be a busy year. And then up in Massachusetts, we don't have to get into this, but in 20, we have Kennedy versus Ed Markey, Congressman Kennedy versus the incumbent Senator Ed Markey, and that's making, the delegation both here in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts uncomfortable because you got to pick sides. Congressman Cicilline has always had a tight relationship with Congressman Kennedy, but you see Senators Reid and Whitehouse. They've already said, well, Ed Markey's the incumbent, so we're gonna support him and back him. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic here. We're watching that race very closely because District 4, which is Congressman Kennedy's district, it starts in Brookline, but it stretches down into our market, which is into the Attleboroughs up through Taunton and then over to the parts of the South Coast. So that's as important as the U.S. Senate races there, that District 4, now that is wide open, I don't think any Republican has thrown their hat into the ring, but that's going to be a very important race for this region as well.
Absolutely. Fascinating stuff on the regional basis, no question about it.
Yeah.
Here we are a year and a half after we last met, and Channel 12 has, by some accounts, caught Channel 10 in the ratings, for lack of a better way of putting it. Certainly some newscasts in particular have. You've invested in your investigative unit in a way that it's even just from a photographic perspective, it looks beefier. I think Nisi got a promotion, it sounded like, or something.
Yes.
So it's a little bit beefed up. This seemed to all happen about the same time as the Globe entered the market. We've got the Public's radio expanding to be more of a regional player now.
Yep.
Adding some reporters. Evidently, they're going to open up a newsroom in Newport at some point, and also South County. How does that all play into what you do on a daily basis in terms of your work? Because not a lot has changed for you. I mean, you're still
well.
Tim
Actually,
White.
Things have changed for me considerably because what happened, and I can probably summarize this in a minute, but we did expand in the investigative unit at Channel 12, and Ted was given a promotion as he's still a reporter, but also the politics and business editor for the unit. But what happened was our executive producer of the unit, a guy named Nick Dommings, he is now press secretary for
Secretary of State, right?
Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. So he went on. So think of him as sort of the manager of the unit, and I worked with Nick for 10 or 11 years, I think. Some of the investigations that are most memorable out of Target 12, Nick had his fingerprints on. Great guy. But when we looked at what we want to do with the investigative unit, we think enterprise journalism is where it's at and where we want to make the investments, and we were looking to expand. Instead of bringing in an executive producer from the outside, what we pitched was I will handle the management of the unit along with my reporting responsibilities. So they made me the managing editor of Target 12, and I'm also a reporter there. And then Ted is, our editor as well, but handling primarily politics and business. We brought in a new producer. Ted and I hired Eli Sherman, who is a digital data reporter, just a great guy, great storyteller, and man, does he dig. We brought in Steph Machado as Dan McGowan went to the Boston Globe. Steph has picked up his beat on the Providence beat. Again, focus on digital. You're going to start hearing a theme from me here, and where we're investing all of that. And we brought in another producer, and then we have our, a couple of photographers in there, and then of course Susan Campbell and Walt Buteau, who are already in the unit with me. And physically in the building, we're now all in the same room, which is great.
Oh, that's
we used to be, we used to be sort of spread out, and now we're all sort of in the same space. It's a cozy space, and it has no windows, so it can be depressing. But no, it's good to be in there and collaborate. So my life actually in the last year has changed profoundly professionally, right, because of all those changes. But it's been great. And the thing I told my bosses was this, that the seniority, the veteran attitude we have with everybody there, it was an easy thing to say yes to manage all these. If it were a different group of people, it would have given me pause. I wanted to retain our autonomy, if you will. The investigative unit has to be able, we are integrated within the newsroom and we are a resource for the newsroom, but we are sometimes working on sensitive things and we have to sort of be off to the side working on things in secret sometimes. And then, we come on the air online with our big story. So we need that autonomy and the authority to do that, to disappear off the air for a week or a couple weeks, whatever, while we're working on a larger project. And to help keep that in place, we thought this structure was going to be the best. And so far, knock on wood, I think, how long have we been doing? I think we're 8 months in to this new structure, and so far we've been loving it.
That's what matters also. If you're happy, that's going to show in the results, the amount of work that you're able to do and the quality of work. So if you're comfortable in that role, then all the power to you, I suppose.
Yeah, more work. I think I sleep a little bit less, but that's okay. Yeah. It's worth it.
As far as the landscape of the media in Rhode Island as a whole, though, do you have any specific goals for the next, I don't know, 2 to 4 years as far as where Channel 12 will grow to? Yeah, I know that the leaning on the digital end of the spectrum is something that Nexstar in particular seems to be doubling down on. But are you trying to win over new audiences or kind of, just conserve or preserve the audience you have and deliver more to them?
Yes and yes, all of it, yeah. Right? I mean, I think that's the goal. We always want to expand our audience. We have, obviously, our broadcast product is very strong. And it continues to grow. All of that is good. You are absolutely right. Our parent company, Nexstar, has focused on our digital product as well, and changing the platform that we work on for when people see WPRI.com, the platform that we write on, that has been changed. And that's really where the company's investments are going. I could give you one small example. 3 or 4 months ago, Channel 12 launched a project called 12 on 12, and they are online-only digital, I guess documentaries are the way to put it. I mean, Walt Buteau just had a great one on the immigration debate through the prism of New England, and it ran, I think, 15 to 18 minutes long. It had a video documentary, but it also had a bunch of digital elements. You can go town by town to find out how the face of immigration or immigrants have changed in a certain community. You can take a citizenship test on our website. If you want to become an American citizen here, you have to take a 10-question test. You have to study 100 questions. And so there's a sample test on there. You can find out how you do. So a lot of stuff that you just couldn't do on the traditional broadcast platform. Nexstar is saying, hey, let's make sure, let's do this on the digital platform and try and grow that audience. And look, it's smart because there is crossover with all of that. Obviously that content was solely for WPRI.com or for the mobile app, but we told people on TV, if our audience, if it's a television audience, we said, hey, you should go check this out, and just here's a quick sample of it all. So, that's the type of work that we're doing over there. I'm doing a 12 on 12 in October. It's going to drop October 29th, and it's organized crime related. I can't say too much about it here, but I'm excited just as a reporter. Sometimes I get a little more time on Channel 12 for the investigations, but you still have to tell your story in a few minutes. We don't have unlimited real estate on Channel 12. Newscasts are what they are, and the show ends when they end. And we have a lot of news that we have to tell our people, a lot of weather and a lot of sports. There's a lot of stuff we try to jam into that package. So my time is limited. On this platform, I don't want it to go too long where it bores people, but we have more leverage. We can present more of the stuff that we've been reporting. And as a reporter, as a journalist, been doing this for a while, that is really exciting for me. It's a different storytelling. It's a different way to approach a narrative than what I'm used to, but it's a good and fun challenge because, Bill, there's so much stuff when we're working on an investigation, and sometimes stuff never makes it. It just doesn't, we don't get the goods, and we have to move on, and we have to be able to shoulder that. But even the stuff that does make it, there's so much on the cutting room floor. And yeah, look, the website's always been there. Oh, Web Extra, we can do this or that. But to be able to tell it all, not just as outboard it as a separate thing, but in one narrative as a whole, I'm really excited about. So, so that keep an eye out for that, October 29th. If you're interested in organized crime, you're going to want to watch this one.
Look out.
Look out.
It's also interesting to think about the future of what the television newscast will be and where it will live as people cut their cords.
I did that.
Did you?
I cut the cord, which I know seems weird as a television reporter, but I'm like, wait a minute. Channel 12, Channel 10, Channel 6, we offer all of this for free. You do not need cable. And my wife and I, we were with internet. I think we were paying $230 a month or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it's insane. Yeah. It was insane. That's like a car payment.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
We just pay for the internet and cut the cord, and we get off air. Integrate it with Air TV and Sling and everything like that.
Yeah.
So we've been able to shrink our cost by $100. But I'm like, wait, all I do, I have to stick an antenna on the side of my house, and I don't have to worry about that bill anymore. So anyway, I'm just very excited about it because you brought it up. I cut the cord.
I think it's the way to go.
Yeah.
I've been over a decade now. I haven't had TV. Looking to the future, having television newscasts coming across the app, coming across the website when there are no more, television becomes sort of like AM radio where, there's a listening audience, but it's mostly moved to FM or off the radio in general. When it gets to that point, the digital extra stuff, these 12 on 12 features, they can live side by side with the newscast. So you have that live newscast, and then it's seamless at that point.
Right. And we, again, the focus of our station is the video element online is very important. If you go to our website, internally we call them video nows. Just that's how we approach them. We know what we're talking about in the newsroom. But what you'll see is, maybe my colleague Brandon Truitt is at a scene of a really bad car accident or a bad fire, let's say a bad fire, and the idea is to file something immediately. And the technology we have is just before, you'd have to get the live truck and do all that. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. And so he will file a 1-minute video now from the scene, and people watch those videos. So if you didn't see it when you were at home watching Brandon in the morning show on Channel 12, people like you who watch primarily online, you're still going to see it's a different approach. Brandon's going to tell the story differently than he would on TV, but you're getting the print article as well, but embedded in that is that video. And people, a lot of people, that's what they want. They want someone to, okay, just tell me what I need to know in 60 seconds or less on this story. And so we file a lot of those video nows, and we have someone internally that now manages just that. I mean, when I started there 13 years ago, that person never existed. The whole landscape is changing within that building, and that's because the focus is on that and getting to that audience, getting to people like you, who that's how you consume your news. So how can we best deliver it and keep it interesting and informational?
Right, and on brand as well.
Brand is very important. Right, you got to stay on brand. Absolutely. You're not going to see. I don't do feature stories. All my cats are stuck up in a tree. Right.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about Jim Taricani.
Yeah, let's do that.
I mean, for me, that was the gold standard for investigative reporting, along with Jack White, your father.
Right.
And we were lucky to have both of those people in this market. For me as a kid growing up, that was nutty, and it really kind of creates a paradigm that's almost, it's unfair to assess investigations, because I think about Taricani with the beard, the fake beard, and carrying him, going into these gun rallies or up in a helicopter over the laborers union or whatever, or the Pulitzer Prize and so forth that your father was awarded. That's a different level of you're stepping into, and it makes it probably somewhat difficult for other people in this market, because that ceiling's there. That's very esoterical as well, because the work you do, just because you don't win an award for it doesn't mean it's not as good or anything like that. But does that motivate you? Is that a challenge that you have?
Yeah, both of them set the bar very, very high, right? I think is what you're trying to say, and
yes.
I agree.
Yep.
And this market has been very fortunate to have some absolute, beacons for journalists here. Dad, of course, Jim, over at the Journal, the late Bill Malinowski, a friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, Mike Stanton, who's now over at UConn. I mean, we could go on and on in the legacy over at the Journal as well. This market has been very lucky to have people like that here. And for me personally, you and I talked about it, I think, last time I was here. Big shoes to fill, obviously, but feel very fortunate to have had both my father, obviously, and Jim Taricani in my life. And when Dad passed away in 2005, I was still working in Boston at the CBS affiliate there, WBZ TV, where I had been for about 8 years at that time. He was the greatest editor in my life, and anytime I needed advice, he was the guy. Our families, the White family and the Taricani family, are very close, and I'd go to baseball games. Jim was unfortunately a Yankees fan, but he he had these great tickets at Fenway Park, right along the first baseline. So Dad and I would go to games with him, and that's how I got to know him. So when Dad passed away, Jim, he filled that void. He really did. And I remember when I was thinking of coming here, the news director at the time, Joe Abizet, he's in Ohio now, but he was bugging me after Dad passed away for like a year to come down. I was like, no way, I'm not going to fill his shoes. As I started to kind of come around to think about it, one of the first people I called was Jim Taricani, and he, instead of being that, well, let's do the pro con, he's like, you got to do it. You have to take this job, and here's why. And keep in mind, I'm going to be Jim's competitor as soon as I come down here. He works at the NBC affiliate. I would work at the CBS affiliate, and we'd go head-to-head on the same beat, in the investigative beat. But he couldn't have been more encouraging, and when I got here, when I landed here, more helpful. I meet up with him. He's like, these are the people you should talk to. You should avoid this person or whatever. And even when I was working on a story, Bill, that I was hung up on, and one that I would probably call Dad or something, there were times, and if my boss is hearing this now, they wouldn't be thrilled, but I would call Jim and go, Jim, I'm jammed up on this one. And he would never burn me. This wasn't often that I would do this, but on the handful of times, he was so helpful, in that moment. And I'm not unique, I have to say. It's not just because I've been talking about this relationship that Dad and Jim had, and I benefited from that. I don't need to tell you, Bill, Jim was like that with a lot of young reporters, young and old. I mean, he was very generous with his time and his knowledge, and I think that shows his confidence, right? Someone who is confident in what they do and how they do it is going to be generous with the resources that they have and the knowledge that they have, and that's just who he was. He made this market a better market overall for journalism, because it was like being in a living classroom with that guy all the time. And he was, you could call him at any moment and he'd help you out. And he loved, I think he loved to do it, and it showed. So huge loss when he passed away. That was a very tough time, brought up a lot, as you can imagine, for me, from when Dad died to when Jim passed away. But I feel so fortunate to have had both of them in my life. And obviously, I'm doing what I'm doing because of them. I could be doing another career, but those two guys made it look very cool.
Yeah,
very, very cool.
No question about it. I know. I wish I could just go back in time to what's the name of the bar?
Hopes.
Hopes. I wish I could go back in time to that place.
Oh, I know.
That seems like that's where the world is.
It was owned by a Journal guy, and all the after they'd file their stories, they'd go to this. So your listeners know, they go to this bar and they just sort of post-mortem the day with quite a few beers, I'm sure. But just the legends that were in that place, talking and sharing stories. Like, I agree, to be a fly on the wall in there would have been something
the
special.
Idea of playing pinball in there with sources and shooting the breeze, and just it sounds very New York-like. It sounds very much like what you'd want to seek out if you had any kind of curiosity in the arts. journalism, academia, etc., law enforcement, whatever it may be, politics, of course, that's where you'd want to be. In those types, around people like Jim Taricani and Jack White.
Right, or Randy Richard, who's co-author
Sure.
of my book along with Wayne Wister. I mean, Jim would tell me that when I think he was a radio reporter out of West Warwick or something. I could have that wrong. But he made it a point to go to Hope's, to hang out with Jack White, to hang out with Randy Richard, hang out with the other reporters there. And he did that so he could soak it in, I mean, speaking of classroom, that classroom was in a bar.
Yeah.
We'll talk about a great classroom, right? With some of the coolest professors of all time in there. And he took advantage of it. He was smart in that way.
Yeah, big time stuff. And as you say, a huge loss. The magnitude of that, of the Taricani funeral, also it just kind of, it reminded me anyway that the work that goes on in again, those same categories, arts, journalism, etc., the lasting impact that it can have, when you see the legacy that can be created on the human being that tells those stories. That was really powerful for me to see that people really had almost a love-like relationship for Jim.
Oh.
And you could feel it, even if it just came through the television and you never met him in your life, just talking to people on the street. That's a magical, powerful experience.
The turnout for his funeral was not surprising, but was just it was really emotional. I mean, and I think so they did this, as you know, Bill, because you were in it, an honor guard of journalists leading up into the church. I was a pallbearer, and we walked Jim into the church, through this honor guard. And the number of people that showed up, the faces that I hadn't seen in a while. I mean, Dan Barry from the New York Times was there, that is the respect that Jim Taricani had. And I think for all of us, I'll speak for myself, but I was talking to some people afterwards. It was a really nice time to reflect on what we do as journalists and why we do it. And it was because every day we're making the sausage and turning out stories and hopefully doing a good job on it. But sometimes you just don't have a moment to reflect. And Jim gave us that moment to reflect in that moment and take a deep breath and realize why we do what we do, because it's not a great time to be a reporter right now. I'm not going to lie to you. It's tough. And but Jim and that entire ceremony was a nice reminder that what we do is a noble thing, and what we do is important to the community, because I live in Rhode Island. I serve this community. That's how I approach this job, and it's good to remember why we do it. So that was just the walking down the two lines of the honor guard was so powerful. It was just almost overwhelming. But what a moment that was. It was really something special.
Yeah, an unbelievable event for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for an unbelievable person, no other way to put it.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of generic, but it's a pretty accurate statement.
It is.
Well, the unbelievable is the actual right word, because it did recontextualize the importance of storytellers in this region.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's no question about it. Last question.
Sure.
If you got another minute or so.
I do, yeah.
Awesome. In terms of, I think I asked you this before. I asked a lot of people if you were a young person looking to get into journalism or getting into digital media, reporting, even PR, what's changed in the last year and a half or so from your vantage point? I'm seeing personally a lot more podcast studios at universities.
Yep.
And seeing podcast instruction as becoming a new job in the world, or just digital media production, digital media instruction. But, a year and a half later after we last talked, what's your advice to anybody out there who wants to make a career switch or is already in school, kind of looking to get into this broad field?
So I actually teach a broadcast news course at Roger Williams University as an adjunct. I teach it every other year. Mm-hmm. And the focus is on digital storytelling. And it's been very interesting to watch how Roger Williams has shifted their program there smartly to the changing winds of media. By the way, I hate the word media because media can mean a lot of different things, but I think in the
Right,
context,
you mean a painting inside, a hotel
Thank
room.
you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you're 100% right. But anyway, they have a podcast course there now, and they have one, two, I don't know how many. I've only seen one, but in the communications building, they have a podcast studio in there. So obviously there's interest from the students in that. That's important for, I'm sure, for enrollment, but there's also value in that form of storytelling. I listen to the New York Times, the Daily, every single day driving into work because I'm captive in my car, and this is I think a quality program, and that's how I want to consume that. But also, with my course, I'm teaching kids how to accurately tell a story for on air, but it is with a focus on digital storytelling. And there are overlaps for all that. When you shoot something, rule of thirds and all that stuff, that is important. But I tell my students, to answer your question, for what do I need to do to break into the business, be it whatever, you got to be a good writer.
Yeah.
You have to be a good storyteller because you can bust your hump for months on an investigation or a big report that you're working on and really worked hard to carve out the information through public records requests or source interviews, whatever it might be. But if you can't effectively put that down on paper, an old school way of saying it, if you can't effectively tell that story, it's a waste. You have just flushed everything you've worked on down the toilet because you can't write. And writing is, I think that's where there's a bit of a crater right now in journalism, and so if somebody is a good writer, read good writers and emulate them, you're going to stand out. And by the way, you have to be able to write in multiple platforms. I started in print a long time ago, quickly moved into TV, but I write more now for air quotes print than I do for television because of our online platform. I will file stories only for online. That's a very different style of writing than it is for television. Television has an active tense. It usually uses sentence fragments, whatever. But your print writing, you can't just take a TV script, change its case, and throw it online. It will not read well. It doesn't. Right. It does not work. You have to take the time and energy to write for those different platforms very uniquely. And that's something that we've put a focus on over at Channel 12 because people, thumb stoppers on Twitter, you see a story, you hopefully click the link. You're going to read, if you're not going to be able to watch the video, you're going to read the first 4 or 5 paragraphs of something. So those better be damn good. 4 or 5 paragraphs right there, or you've lost that reader maybe forever. And that, again, is a different style of writing. So be a good writer is my advice to any young person who's looking to get into journalism.
Oh, that's so basic and it's so true.
I know, it feels so trite when I talk about that, but it's like the main. Ted Nisi and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah,
we need good writers here, and I think we're surrounded by good writers in the over at Channel 12. That's a focus that they've made there.
It is, I agree. It's a pleasant sight to read. It's a tone, as you say, the newscast, the different tones. It is adapted well. It's funny because I run in Motif magazine. I run a print edition of the podcast, and for the last year or so, I would basically transcribe a portion of an episode.
Is that what it is, like the Q&A kind of?
Exactly, and then I'll give a little sentence or two at the beginning. Oh, Lindsay Idaluca, or I'll say women have may have a hard time on television or in news media because of that men don't have oftentimes because of people sexual harassment on Twitter, says Lindsay Idaluca, whatever, and then go straight to the quote. And it's funny enough because actually I've had more people in the last, I think people are now getting to the point where they can be honest with me, and some people have come up to me and said, respect to journalists, people that I know you respect, and said, you can't do that, man. You can't run a transcript in the newsprint. That doesn't read well at all. Take that and break it down. Give us some kind of feedback on it or something like that, because you really have to have not only the ability to write, but as you say, write for the audience and write for the moment.
Yeah, look, you're not writing for your mom, you're not writing for your girlfriend,
exactly,
right? You're writing for a broader audience. And right. What I like you just said there is you identified a lead, and you wrote that lead to get into the podcast, it sounds like. And basically, you're telling people why you should care about this topic that I'm asking you to spend some time on with me, either listening to the podcast or reading through it. And Bill, I do agree it's more work for you, but sometimes 10 questions with so-and-so is cool, and you can do the questions in bold and the answers, whatever, but I think people, they want to know what you think is the most important thing out of this 45-minute interview that you did, and give it to me with the most important stuff up front.
Right.
People just, their time, they're getting blasted with content all over the place. So the competition is stiff. It's no longer 20 years ago. We just had these TV stations in Rhode Island. We are competing globally for your attention. So we do have a foot up locally because we are talking about things that are in your sandbox of Rhode Island in southern New England. So that's something that a global outfit can't do. But what we are doing better resonate, and it better be damn good.
Couldn't agree more. Go buy The Last Good Heist, by the way.
Please buy 100 copies for your closest friends.
Each person, yeah. As always, thanks for listening to the Bartholomewtown Podcast. A great way to support the pod is to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening right now. Until next time, I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.